Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. It's really a great pleasure to get a chance to talk to you about our November 6th concert, Baroque Brilliance. I am really looking forward to this program. While I have performed some Baroque music with the Champaign-Urbana Symphony Orchestra over the years, this will just be our second Baroque-only program so far. I spend so much of my time in Chicago and elsewhere performing Baroque music. I thought I would just share a few of the recent activities that we've had going. And let's see. I was going to first share that last month, relating to Baroque music, Josephine and I had a chance to perform in a beautiful church, St. Michael's in Jena, Germany. This is a very old and historic church. Martin Luther preached there in 1522. His original epitaph, which you see there, is in the church. They also have a magnificent modern pipe organ. I'm calling it modern because it was built the same year that I was. And it was really a lot of fun to play this instrument. Jena happens to be in the region of northern Germany where Weimar and Leipzig are, and where Bach lived and worked. So, of course, we visited Eisenach, the town where Bach was born, and toured his birth house and the amazing museum there. I was in absolute heaven. I've never been to a museum where I literally stopped and read every single exhibit as fully as I could. And I think that I know a bit about Bach, but I still learned so much there. Many of you are aware that one of the groups that I conduct at Northwestern is our Baroque Music Ensemble, which was very active recording during the pandemic. Here's a little taste of that group doing an Overture in D by Telemann. So it's really a great pleasure to work with these very talented students on Baroque performance practice. You may have noticed the strings we're playing with Baroque bows, and it's just a wonderful learning opportunity for them. I also, of course, do a lot of performing with music of the Baroque in Chicago, and that's a real pleasure. More about that in a second. A week ago, Josephine and I did a fair amount of Baroque music for the Jane Austen Society of North America annual meeting. Josephine and I, before we were actually, when we were just friends, before we were a couple, about 11 years ago, we did our first performance on Jane Austen in music. And it's just been something that we do frequently over the years, especially on significant anniversaries like the 200th anniversary of the publication of Sense and Sensibility in 2011, of Pride and Prejudice in 2013, of Emma in 2015, and many presentations. We always finish with a piece from the later 18th century by František Kočevara called The Battle of Prague, which we act out completely. Josephine also plays her violin on this program and some of the songs that Jane Austen liked. Here you see some images from the Battle of Prague, which Josephine acts completely. There's the Lament of the Wounded. Oh, it's really so tragic. And there's God Save the King, which is in a lot of these battle pieces from the time. And it was a really, really fun thing to do. We're headed to another Jane Austen conference in North Carolina in June. And I'm laying a seed here for our wonderful executive director, Jerry, that sometime we'd love to come do this as a fundraiser for Champaign-Urbana Symphony Orchestra, for all the people in Champaign who love Jane Austen. As I was mentioning, I frequently play with music of the Baroque. This is from our concert back on September 10th at Millennium Park, where we had 6,500 people help us kick off the season. And this is, it's a little blurry, but that's Stacey Garrett coming on stage after the premiere of a piece that Music of the Baroque commissioned from Stacey for their 50th anniversary, which was actually last year. And it was called Spectacle of Light, based on Handel's Royal Fireworks music. And it was a huge hit, as you can see from the standing people there. We also just performed at the Gala for Music of the Baroque this past Saturday. So lots of Baroque music along those lines. Just a word about the harpsichord that I'm going to be bringing down, that I'm going to let you hear in a second. It's an instrument that was built in 2004 by a California builder named John Phillips. He's based in Berkeley, California. I ordered the instrument in 1999, and it took 5 years for it to be made. But it's personalized. It has saguaro cactus blossoms in honor of my home state of Arizona. It has this perky cardinal that, if it looks like a St. Louis cardinal, it is, because it's in honor of my father, who was a lifelong Cardinals fan. And I'm happy to report that this past summer, Josephine and I welcomed a new addition to our family, which is not what you think. A new harpsichord by John Phillips, at least new to us. And this, you'll notice, has just one manual. It's a Flemish instrument, really lovely harpsichord. This instrument actually has a pheasant on the soundboard. They always put birds of some type on the soundboard to represent the wood coming back to life in music. And this harpsichord has a really different sound, because the quills that pluck the strings, unlike the one you see behind me, which these quills are made from a synthetic called Delrin that are supposed to be like bird quill. This harpsichord actually has bird quill. It's quilled in Canadian goose. I picture the builder chasing goose over, the hills of British Columbia to get the quill from my harpsichord. But it has a really authentic sound, and I hope that someday I can bring it there for you to hear. When I come, though, in November, the harpsichord will be a part of what we call the continuo group. And I often get asked questions, what is continuo exactly? Because every piece we'll play on this program has continuo. Well, Baroque continuo consists, first of all, of an instrument that plays chords. It could be the harpsichord, organ, theorbo, guitar, harp. Often it has an instrument that doubles the bass line, like the cello or bassoon. And often a strumming instrument that adds rhythm, like a theorbo. The harpsichord does that, or Baroque guitar. And it's exactly paramount or synonymous with a jazz combo, where you have a piano or a harmonizing instrument, vibraphones or the like, a double bass plucking along, or an electric bass, and other rhythm like a drum set or other percussion. The other parallels would be that the harpsichordist or organist in a Baroque continuo group plays from a piece of music like this that has a bass line with numbers called figured bass. You see the melody there above, and then just below this bass line with these numbers, 6/4, 6/4 with a sharp, etc. Those are the figures that tell the keyboard player what to play. And it's exactly the same in jazz, where they have what's called a lead sheet. Here they have just the melody, but again, they have the chords indicated, and that's all they have to play from. And they make all that amazing improvisation just from something like that. So since you're not going to hear the harpsichord in a solo capacity, and to get you in the mood for the Baroque music that we have to come. Oh yeah, and I was going to mention that in my presentations at Northwestern, I have on several occasions gotten together both a Baroque continuo group that's set up on the far side of the stage there, and a jazz combo to really show the similarities between these two groups. It's a lot of fun. Anyhow, since you're not going to hear the harpsichord this time around in a solo capacity, I'm going to just kick us off here with some music by Bach, one great composer who doesn't appear on this Baroque program, but this will at least show this lovely harpsichord behind me in a solo row. This is with my colleagues from Music of the Baroque in a recording we just did in September. Isn't that happy music? I hope it put you in a good mood.
The first movement.
Oops, sorry. That's my friend Declan, who's the executive director of music of the Baroque. Okay, so now on to our exciting program. And I'm really looking forward to this because I just love every piece on this concert, Baroque Brilliance. We're going to be featuring violin soloists, trumpet soloists, and John Dee on oboe. And the first piece is by the Italian composer Antonio Caldara. Now, Caldara had a career that moved between many important musical locations throughout Europe. He studied at St. Mark's in Venice, as you will hear, like Vivaldi, and held positions at various times in Mantua, Rome, Barcelona, and Rome again. And for the last part of his career, in Vienna. He seems to have been savvy when it came to seeking sponsorship of those in power. While working in the employ of Prince Francesco Ruspoli in Rome, he went to Spain to actively ingratiate himself with the Spanish court and the burgeoning Habsburg Empire. And this is what led to his appointment as a vice Kapellmeister in Vienna in 1716, where he spent the last 2 decades of his life. Caldara certainly met Handel in 1708 in Rome and was one of the most respected musicians in Europe. Now, this sinfonia you're going to hear that opens the program is a total gem. I did not know it. I just came across it on YouTube a few years ago. Impossible to find parts. I don't know where these folks who did the recordings found their music, but we could find nothing available online. So we had parts made here at Northwestern from my Baroque Music Ensemble to play, and I've since done it with a number of groups. I'm so excited to bring it to Champaign because it's just a brilliant piece. The first movement brings a sort of joyous vignette of one solo instrument after the other. It's really like a concerto grosso, which was the standard form of the concerto in the Baroque. Grosso meaning the large concerto that included both a group of soloists known as the concertino and the full group known as the ripieno. Very similar word to say the Spanish relleno, like chili relleno, full or stuffed. Well, ripieno means the full group in Italian. So I'm going to play the opening of this first movement for you, and you'll hear the different solo instruments come in. But wait for this one delightful passage of only about 8 bars for 2 solo bassoons. It goes by kind of fast, so make sure you don't miss it. Here's the beginning of the Sinfonia in C. So there you just heard the little passage for the solo bassoons. I think they sound like really happy woodchucks right there. And that's the only place in the whole Sinfonia like that. So I guess that's why I particularly love it. The second movement of the Sinfonia is just for strings. And the final movement really dances along in a flowing triple time. You're going to love this piece, I promise. Surely the most famous piece on this concert is the one by Johann Pachelbel, known as Pachelbel's Canon, and the vastly less famous Jig, or Giga in German, that it is paired with. If Pachelbel could somehow have just earned future royalties on the weddings alone that this piece has been used for, think how rich he would have been. Pachelbel was an important organist from the generation before Bach. He died or he was born and died in Nuremberg. He was the teacher of Johann Christoph Bach, J.S. Bach's older brother, and the person who basically served as J.S. Bach's first teacher. Johann Pachelbel was organist in the last part of his career at the Sebalduskirche in Nuremberg, Germany, which you see there. So back to this famous canon. The thing I'm curious about is, of all the times you've heard this, outside of weddings, let's say, how many times have you actually got to hear it live in concert? It's a really fun piece to watch in concert, just with the way that all the different voices enter between the three solo violins. There are no violas in this piece, just the solo violins, ripieno violins, cello, bass, and continuo, harpsichord. So this is a lovely recording where they use organ as the continuo instrument. And the second violin from the left is Carla Moore, who's a colleague that I've worked with a few times in operas here at Northwestern, and a terrific player. I think you'll enjoy this performance. So that's probably a bit faster than you're used to hearing it, although it's a wonderful, lively tempo. Of course, if used at a wedding, the bride would probably have to positively skip down the aisle to that. My tempo will be slightly slower, and we'll use a few more players in this, but I really do love the purity of that recording that we just heard. The jig, yum da 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 dim da 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 da, like most jigs, is in a flowing triple time, a short and dancey number that sadly gets so much less attention than the famous canon that starts that pairing. The next piece on our program will be by Antonio Vivaldi. We'll be doing an oboe concerto. And just a bit about Vivaldi's background to share. He was really a giant of the Baroque age, so influential. He composed in so many genres, and they included over 500 concertos, 250 for violin, over 90 sonatas, over 50 operas. When's the last time you heard of a Vivaldi opera? Over 70 sacred vocal works, terrific music there, over 40 solo vocal cantatas, and many miscellaneous works. And I feel like the most important thing to know about Vivaldi is that we hear so much his Four Seasons and the Gloria, which are delightful works. And the Four Seasons in particular is a work of genius, or works for concertos. But the true glories of Vivaldi are in so many works that are simply not widely known and deserve to be better known. You could say that the birth of Antonio Lucio Vivaldi was earth-shaking because in Venice, the day he was born, March 4th, 1678, there was a large earthquake. It was discovered that Vivaldi received 2 baptisms. He was so weak at birth that the assisting midwife baptized him on the spot, fearing they would lose him. But Antonio survived, and he was formally baptized 1 month later by his parish priest. He received instruction on the violin from his father, Giovanni Battista Vivaldi. The fact that his father was a barber surgeon is a similarity he shared with George Friedrich Handel. Giovanni was accepted into the orchestra at the Basilica of San Marco in Venice. And I'm sure if I asked you to raise your hands if you've ever been there, many of you would. It's one of the most famous destinations in Italy. Giovanni's son Antonio became an exceedingly fine violinist and made his first public appearance that we know of in 1698 at the age of 20 as an extra violinist at the Basilica. Antonio began his studies for the priesthood at the age of 15 and was ordained in 1703 at the age of 25. Due to his red hair, posterity gave him the name Il Prete Rosso, the Red Priest. But within a year of his ordination, Vivaldi chose to stop saying Mass. Later in life, he wrote a letter to an acquaintance saying that an asthmatic condition made him leave the altar several times, thus preventing him from completing the Mass. It has been noted that for a man who maintained such a vigorous career, this citation of weakness is a paradox. In any case, Vivaldi's withdrawal from traditional priestly duties resulted in him having more time to devote to music. In that same year of 1703, Vivaldi landed a position at the place where he would spend the majority of his career. This was known as L'Ospedale della Pietà in Venice, of course. L'Ospedale della Pietà was an orphanage where boys learned a trade, while girls who showed the aptitude received musical training in instruments and singing. And under Vivaldi's guidance, the girls of L'Ospedale became one of the most renowned ensembles in Europe. They played an important public role for the solicitation of gifts and legacies to support the institution. A visitor to L'Ospedale, Charles de Brosse, who was a president of an organization in Burgundy and an ambassador, wrote after hearing Vivaldi's pupils, "They are trained only to excel at music. They sing like angels, they play the violin, the flute, the oboe, the organ. In short, there is no instrument so large they are afraid of it." And I love this recreation by the BBC of Vivaldi's Gloria that's made to look like a performance from L'Ospedale. And you see that they're singing behind a screen. And this custom existed in Italy for a long time, that the idea that the female performers should be heard but not seen, even by way over a century later, like 160 years later, when Verdi was trying to get his new Requiem performed in Milan, he had to get special permission from the city council to allow the female singers to not be behind a screen. They did insist that they still wear veils, if you can believe it. I guess we can actually believe it after everything we've been through lately. Vivaldi became known to European nobility through his career, but his career began to decline in the 1740s as musical fashions sort of changed. He was knighted by Charles VI and ultimately moved to Vienna, but Charles soon died, and Vivaldi was left without a supporter. Vivaldi died penniless in Vienna. More about that in a minute. Just wanted to show a few of the images. Oh yeah, and I also wanted to just explain that all these pieces by Vivaldi have a number after them. Like the oboe concerto we're doing is the Concerto for Oboe in A minor, RV 461. And it's the catalog, and it stands for Riom-Verzeichnis, after the Danish musicologist Peter Riom, who made the catalog. And of course, they're very helpful in keeping straight these hundreds of works that exist. Vivaldi was so renowned that even composers like Bach, who never left the northern part of Germany, knew about him. And Bach transcribed a number of concertos by Vivaldi, like this Concerto Grosse in A minor. Here's what it sounds like on the organ. And there you hear the concertino group, the solo group, coming in on a different manual of the organ. My Baroque ensemble at Northwestern, by the way, is playing that piece in its original version right now. Such terrific music. We don't have many authentic images of Vivaldi, but this is one, an engraving done in 1725. This is a caricature from 2 years before, at a time when Vivaldi was having an opera premiered. And you know, the one curious thing about Vivaldi, having lived most of his life in Venice and had most of his career there, is that at the end of his career, he ventured to Vienna. That's why I got mixed up earlier on, and tried to seek his fortune there, and things didn't go well, and he died penniless. And this marker commemorates where his grave may be. But the truth is, he was buried in an unmarked grave in the cemetery in Vienna. And possibly Mozart was buried very close to where Vivaldi was buried. So that's really kind of unusual. In fact, when Vivaldi died, if he had had more means, Joseph Haydn, who was a chorister at St. Stephen's, where Vivaldi's funeral mass was, might have sung for Vivaldi's funeral, except Vivaldi was so poor that they only rang the bells. So this concerto is going to feature our principal oboe, John Dee. I like that photo a lot. And it's in 3 movements, like most concertos are. And I wanted to play for you just the end of the very brilliant first movement into the second movement, because there's an important thing to know about this and many other second movements by Vivaldi. He favored second movements that featured kind of stark, often simple, repetitive patterns, accompanimental patterns in the strings, over which a solo instrument, be it violin or oboe, or many others, would just soar with these lyrical lines. And it became very influential. So here's the end of the first movement going into the second movement. So the first movement's allegro non molto, and the second movement is larghetto. Just listen to how long a phrase that is over that just repetitive, pulsating accompaniment. That's a really beautiful Baroque oboe playing. Of course, we'll be using modern instruments for our concert, but it's worth noting that every time instruments evolve, they're usually doing so for more projection, reliability, and particularly in the case of woodwind instruments, better intonation. The Baroque music, that player makes it look so easy, but they're really hard to play and control. And as the instrument evolved, they would add more and more keys to make the intonation better. But every instrument, as it evolves, something is gained and something is lost. And in the case of this instrument, there's just an incredible sweetness to the Baroque oboe that I really love to hear. So, going on in our program, the next music is by Georg Philipp Telemann. Telemann created a staggering number of compositions during his long career, thousands of works for the church, stage, public, and private events. Telemann takes credit for being the most prolific composer in music history. Remarkably, his imagination remained keenly fixed into very old age. He lived, as you can see, quite a long life. And despite the weakness in his legs and diminished eyesight, until his death in 1767, he kept writing very good music. The Hamburg Neue Zeitung, the newspaper, upon his death said, "For all friends and connoisseurs of music, it is enough to mention his name. Any homilies on that great talent by which he earned such fame and honor are now unnecessary." Telemann's fame reached its apex during his time in Hamburg, which lasted from 1721 through the end of his life. He was appointed at first to the St. Thomas, as cantor of the Johanneum, a civic position comparable to the cantor of St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, involving the supervision of music at the main churches, the weekly composition of two church cantatas, and many other responsibilities. Hamburg was a thriving metropolis on the Elbe River, and it became the undisputed center of both commerce and musical activity until the end of the 17th century for sure, and well into the 18th. This unstoppable musical secularization, moving towards opera, certainly distressed the local church officials, but a sort of uncomfortable coexistence came about between the sacred and progressive secular styles, of which Telemann was a master. Soon after becoming cantor in Hamburg, he involved himself in public concerts and operatic performance. Church authorities censored these activities, but Telemann played a trump card. He had applied for the cantorate in Leipzig, recently left vacant by the death of Johann Kuhnau, and he was offered the position in 1723. Johann Sebastian Bach, of course, was the town council's third choice after Telemann, and when Christoph Graupner turned the job down. With this counter-offer in hand from Leipzig, Telemann bargained for a higher salary and complete artistic freedom in Hamburg. So, this first piece that we'll be playing is his Concerto for Three Trumpets, which also includes two oboes, bassoon, and timpani. And it has four movements, actually. And the four movements, not quite yet. Well, you just heard a little bit. The four movements are Intrada, Allegro, which is quite fugal in the German manner, a Largo, and Vivace. So the Intrada, as the name would suggest, befits the ceremonial nature and sound of trumpets. and you hear the trumpets enter and sort of call to each other. Now, the third movement, the largo of this concerto, actually doesn't involve the trumpets at all. It's just for solo oboe and strings. And it is very much like the style of the slow movement that you heard in the Vivaldi oboe concerto, just showing how influential that style was. Now, Telemann, for his part, wrote almost as much French-style music as he did Italianate-influenced music, but this piece has more of the Italian influence. The movement that I really love is the last movement, the Vivace. It is in 6/8 time, and you'll hear a brilliant back and forth between the trumpets. And as you listen to this, I'll let you in on a little secret. And if you come to the concert, which I hope you will, you'll see if I'm successful in this or not. But when I do this piece, I love to place the trumpets on opposite sides of the stage. There are 3 of them, so I'll usually have one on the right, one on the left, and one more in the middle. And the reason I like to do that is because of all of the call and response writing in the music. It's so wonderful and stereophonic to see it and hear it from one side of the stage and the other. Now, trumpet players usually are reticent to do this because they're used to playing, in groups of 2 or 3, right there together, so where they can hear each other. But I have successfully shepherded trumpets through this arrangement on at least 3 other occasions, and it's been really fun. So wish me luck, okay? You'll hear this antiphonal writing here in this swinging, wonderful vivace. Now, in the recording, it may sound like one trumpet going lum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum, but it's actually lum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum ba 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 bum. And maybe it's just for my own personal fun. I just love standing in the middle of that. It's like Wimbledon, back and forth. It's really a lot of fun. We will follow the concerto for 3 trumpets with Telemann's concerto for 3 violins. And this is a fantastic piece of music. I think what you'll deeply enjoy are the rich sonorities, kind of like we heard in the Canon, from just the 3 violins, but they create this wonderful sonic tapestry. Here's a bit of the first movement. So you see, it's rather egalitarian. After the first soloist gets their opportunity, then the second soloist, and then the third. And by the way, the first part here is being played by Jasmine Lynn, a longtime colleague of mine who is almost as much fun to watch, I think, as she is to play. There's a ballerina inside that body, I think. But the second movement I also want to note in the concerto because it's just so beautiful. Here's just a little bit of this second movement. can't wait to hear Maria and Alex and Gayan, our soloists, play this together. It's just going to be a feast for the ears. And of course, on the Three Trumpet Concerto, our soloist will be Jennifer Brown and Tracy Parrish and Anne McNamara. So very excited to have them as well. The last work on the program comes from the French Baroque by Jean-Philippe Rameau. And Rameau was an extremely important figure. He was not only one of the most significant opera composers of his time for the Royal French Court, he was also a music theorist of quite some importance. Here's his treatise on music theory from 1722. And perhaps it was his deep understanding of melody and harmony in particular that imbues his music with such unique aspects. I just love it. I play a lot of Rameau on the harpsichord because he wrote a lot of music for the harpsichord. And I've conducted a fair amount from his operas. But it's particularly fun for me to play his music on the harpsichord because his harmonies are just so rich and lovely and beautiful. We're going to conclude our concert, and I'm going to invite any questions you have after I play some of this. But we're going to conclude our concert with a very short, exciting overture to his opera Nais. And what I love about this piece is it's really Rameau at his most idiosyncratic. After a very suspenseful beginning, brimming with energy, there's this sudden timpani stroke, and the orchestra just explodes into these new and very powerful fireworks. So you'll see what I mean about this. This is a fun performance by Emmanuel Haïm, noted Baroque conductor. So this is the Overture to Nais by Jean-Philippe Rameau. All right, so I'm not going to play the whole thing for you because I want you to come hear how it ends. It's a great ending. And I very much believe in my choice to start this concert with a sinfonia and end it with an overture. But I think that when you hear the whole piece here, you'll agree with my choice, be it unusual, because it's just really fantastic, fun music, and I think a great way to send the audience out. So I think this is a musical feast that you will very much enjoy. I would be delighted to take any questions that you might have. I will stop sharing my screen right now. Give me a second to figure out how to do that. Okay, let me see. I think I stopped sharing my screen. Amanda, let me know if I somehow didn't do that right. Yeah, so I would be happy to take any questions that you might have. I think Amanda's in charge of unmuting folks. Oh, there we go. Stop share. Oh, okay, good. Well, at least I succeeded in doing that.
Eileen Borgia.
Okay, well, it looks like at least one person is unmuted. Please feel free to unmute. I'd love to see you and I'd love to hear from you.
I'm unmuted. So I'm interested in Vivaldi.
Uh-huh.
I seem to remember he had a chorus or an orchestra of young women, and I think they were illegitimate.
Yes, that was the orchestra that I was talking about at L'Ospedale della Pietà
Yeah, yeah.
in Venice. And they were not necessarily illegitimate, they were orphans.
Okay.
Yeah, but they became renowned for being one of the best ensembles in Europe at the time.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking forward to the concert.
Oh, good. I think you'll enjoy it. As I look here, I'm also going to welcome my mom from Arizona. She
Wow.
she goes by the moniker New iPad.
I saw a new iPad.
New iPad. That's my mom, Peggy, out in Arizona.
Hey,
And
great.
you know, during the pandemic, she got to go to pretty much everything I did, every presentation, every lecture, every performance, because it was all on video. And now now that we're back to normal, it's not quite the same. So it's great to have this today. Other
Yeah.
questions?
Oh, I have a question, Stephen.
Yes.
Are you bringing your the harpsichord right behind you?
Yes, I'm bringing the one that's right behind me there.
Yeah.
This is the bigger of the two. As you can see, it has two manuals.
Okay.
What is this about?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that.
But the one difference is, you may have noticed Emmanuel Haim was standing at a harpsichord as she conducted. I just had some blocks made that I hope I'll be able to bring. They've been used once already that allow me to elevate the harpsichord and allow me to stand while I play. So it kind of gives me the best of both worlds of standing and conducting. I just sent those back to the designer of them so they could be finished, literally varnished and everything, so they'll match the harpsichord. And I hope that they'll be ready, at least so we have that option in Champaign.
That sounds good.
Yeah. And I see we have at least one other Peggy. Oh, maybe she just disappeared. I was going to say, oh, no, Peggy Grossman is here, one of our oboe players. So I'm curious if she has any thoughts on the Baroque oboe.
I unmuted. No, I remember once, no, probably 50 years ago, trying to play it. It's very difficult. As you said, the modern oboe is much easier. And wonderful program, Stephen. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I have a Baroque oboe in my office that I make available to students so they can have the same experience that you did. It's kind of like the sword and the stone for King Arthur. Nobody's successfully, managed it completely yet, but one of these days somebody's going to become a Baroque oboe player because of that oboe in my office, I'm sure.
Well, and that's what happened to me. I was at Stanford and I borrowed the school's Baroque for a while, but it was quite difficult.
Yeah, it's almost a completely different instrument. It's true. Good. Any other questions? I see Nadia and Carl, so nice to see you there.
My email.
Yeah.
I think it's Carl's birthday.
Tell you later.
Really?
Your birthday, Carl?
Is today your birthday? Give us a thumbs up because we can't hear you. Is it, Nadia, is it true? Is it Carl's birthday? We can't hear you, but I'm going to assume it is. Hold on.
Well, okay.
It's true.
Now I should be.
Birthday. Oh,
Thank you.
You've had happy birthday played on a harpsichord today.
All right, by
Oh, there's Walter and Eileen. Good to see you. Have a great day, by the way, Carl.
Thank you. It's been miserable so far. The high point so far has been a nasal swab.
oh.
Oh, how special.
Yeah, right. Well, that's until this Zoom performance, of course.
Well, if it makes you feel any
Improved
better,
your day immensely.
Josephine just had to go do the same thing because she leaves tomorrow to go perform with the Louisville Baroque orchestra in programs entitled Bach and Bourbon. They're literally performing.
What a better place than
Yeah, they're literally performing
Perfect
Bach in
place.
some bourbon distilleries, and she had to have a positive, a negative COVID test to go perform. So part of life these at the moment, I guess.
And can she perform and drink bourbon?
Josephine's not a bourbon sort of person.
Okay.
He's a
Yeah.
hot tea drinker.
So she's a hot tea, although being from the Netherlands, she doesn't mind a good beer, which is one of the things I enjoy too. So
A triptych, no doubt.
yes, absolutely.
Would you tell us a bit more about the traditional Baroque instruments and how they're different from modern instruments?
Yes, absolutely. Well, quickly about the flute. The flute, for a long time, going back literally thousands of years, it's one of the very first instruments besides probably stones of some kind. I mean, there are 40,000-year-old flutes made of bear femur and bat wing. And so the flute played like this, a straight tube, is extremely ancient. But in the Baroque period, early on, they had a new innovation, which was to play a flute that went across like this, where the breath transversed the flute. And the name of the instrument was the traverso, or the German flute, because it was so prominent in Germany, but just as prominent in France. I think the main reason it was called the German flute, like I saw in a lot of Jane Austen's music books, there were a lot of parts for German flute, was because it was an instrument played by Frederick the Great. And I think it was because of the prominence of that and his teacher and court musician Johann Quantz that it got that name. But that was one innovation, that the flute moved from this, which is called a recorder or block flute, to this, which is called the traverso. The string instruments, substantively, the setup of them are the same today as they were, in that the violins have 4 strings, tuned as they used to be. Although, especially in the Baroque, they explored lots of different tuning combinations where they would take those strings and move them up or down a step, sometimes even cross them like this, and do all sorts of interesting imaginative things. But what was really different was that the strings were made out of gut, not steel as they are today. The steel lasts a lot longer, it projects a lot more, it has a more brilliant sound. The gut strings have a very beautiful, warm sound. They're just much harder to tune, and they break a lot more often. And that was gut meaning cattle gut. Although I've never told my cats the truth about that. If they're ever misbehaving, I just put on a nice recording of a viol concert and they shape right up. Anyhow, but the Baroque bow had a little more arc to it, just a little more concavity, and that made it a little easier to reach multiple strings at the same time. And the Baroque bow had a very definite strength with the down bow and lightness with the up bow, which is part and parcel of the shape of Baroque music. We want that shape. The modern bow, which was invented in the 19th century, evened out the weight of the bow so that the up bow had more weight, similar to the down bow. But in Baroque music, we want that property of the bow. So those are just a couple examples. Of course, the harpsichord, which was around for hundreds of years before the piano came along, has a plucked sound. And it doesn't matter how hard you press down on the key, it's only going to make that much sound when it's plucked. You get loud by playing more notes or longer notes. And it's a misnomer that harpsichords don't do dynamics. They do dynamics, but they're more subtle, and they're more for the connoisseur's ear, if I might say. The pianoforte was invented in 1690 in Italy by Bartolomeo Cristofori, but it didn't really take hold into the middle of the 18th century. Even J.S. Bach probably played a forte piano, and the names are interchangeable, by the way. Forte piano, pianoforte. They both mean either soft loud or loud soft, and that was the innovation, that you could strike a key with more pressure and get a louder sound. And that was really useful in music. And so by the end of the 18th century, the pianoforte or forte piano had taken hold and was most popular. That is a very short lecture on a topic I would be happy to talk for hours on. So don't get me started too much.
Thank you very much. A few years ago at Cranert, you invited the audience to take a closer look at your harpsichord.
Oh, sure.
Will we have an opportunity to do that on the 6th?
So long as you don't have a glass of red wine in your hand, which is unlikely at Faith United Methodist Church, absolutely. You're welcome to come up and take a look. at the harpsichord. The one kryptonite for any harpsichord is having anything spilled on it, because you can't repair that, really. But I'm just kidding. I know, and you'll be most welcome to come take a look at the harpsichord, and I'll be happy to show how it makes the sound and all of that. So by all means. So,
you.
well, I see we're now at 1:34, so I don't want to keep you all, but I really appreciate your coming out. Jerry?
And I'd like to close by, first of all, thanking you for such a wonderful presentation. It's just the way that we can kind of recover ourselves. We're used to your Ollie lectures, which are just outstanding. And so this is another outstanding performance by you behind as our lecturer. But I also want to let people know that this has been recorded, and we will be sending the link out to the broader audience who maybe couldn't join us today at 12:30, but will hopefully be able to tune in and get a great presentation on Baroque Brilliance. So thank you so much, Stephen. I'd also like to thank our operations manager, Amanda Ramey, who's the woman behind the white, CUSO horn that you see where it just says operations, because she's the invisible infrastructure. She's always like the woman behind things, making everything work well, but very rarely seen. So thank you, Amanda. I'm applauding you.
Thank you, Amanda. Just one example, one piece that we have coming up in December, I only had a score for, and I said, I fear that we'll have to have parts made. Boom, in my inbox, just about an hour and a half ago. There they are, made by Amanda. She does so much, and invisible infrastructure is right. She's just more valuable than we can really express. So, as is Jerry. So, thank you all very much for being here today. I look forward to seeing you soon for this Baroque program, and in December, back in Cranard. Yay! Can't wait. All right.
Great. Okay, thanks a lot.
Have a great day, everybody.
Your harpsichord. Thank you.
See you soon.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.